Hey, welcome back to the 100 Movements podcast. So glad you're here to join us. My name's Brian Johnson, part of the team here, joined by Lindsey Harwood and Rich Robinson. And over the last 5 episodes, we have been exploring the crisis facing the church in the West. We've talked about how do we uncover, rediscover the original Jesus movement? How do we move back toward that? How do we not, I'm just going to be crass, give the finger to the church as we know it, but celebrate that Jesus has always been in charge. But yet, there's something our hearts are aching for. There's something that we're longing for, which is to recapture, that move of God that we read in the pages of the New Testament. Like in those moments where we read what Jesus was doing, we're like, I want to see that. I want to see that realized, and I'm not seeing it realized. Or we read the pages of Acts and we go, how do we see that happen? And then, we hear about movements happening globally and we go, why not here? Why not now? And we've talked about some paradigm shifts. In one of the episodes, Rich walked through the MDNA, which we may sort of uncover again here today. We've wrestled with some cultural and institutional and personal resistance that holds us back. But today, this kind of last episode in the series is going to reflect on what we've talked about, holding this context of 100 Movements is here to help the church reimagine itself as a movement, to make that shift from institutional to movemental Christianity in the West. And we sort of just ask a very general question, what now? How do we join? Where do we go from here? Today, I want to start just with a personal story, so I'm going to ask Lindsey to go, hey, what was your story like? How did you get into this? What's your commitment to this? How would you encourage people to think about that? Let's just start there. So, Lindsey, you kind of unpacking that with us before we jumped on this call. Like, I think it'd be real helpful for people that are listening and go, how do I do this?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a funny thing for me to start talking about this because I have been in institutional church for, my whole life. And what's funny is actually my context hasn't changed at all throughout this journey. My husband is still a local pastor. My dad is still a pastor. My brother is still a pastor. We're still in local church Sunday morning gatherings every week. But I've changed. So my journey, I started through talking about APEST. And I uncovered my wiring as an evangelist and started trying to understand what that meant. I took the APEST test on 5Q Central, and as I came out as an evangelist, I immediately had a reaction of like, I'm not an evangelist, because evangelists travel around and speak, or they stand on street corners with a sign saying repent or else. I don't do either of those things. I am not that. And it was actually through this self-discovery of realizing what that actually means, of being someone who connects with other people, being someone who enjoys meeting new people, and also a champion of things I love. Anyone who knows me knows that I enjoy CrossFit, and I'm always trying to convince my husband to come and join me, or friends. Most of them won't, but I'm trying because I'm passionate. And the things that I'm passionate about, I just share, and that's part of being an evangelist. So as I've uncovered how I'm wired, it has sparked something in me to read books more about how do I steward that. I'm gifted in this, but it's not just for CrossFit's sake. It's for the sake of the kingdom. It's for Jesus that I was made this way. He wired me this way. So what is my responsibility? And I started reading books and starting to think about, okay, what does this mean for my neighbor? And what does this mean for the girl that I have coffee with once a week? And how do I actually start activating that gift in a way that brings Jesus into every conversation? And so through that, it changed the way that my husband and I started looking at our Sunday morning gatherings. It changed the way that we thought about discipleship small groups. It changed the way we led our board meetings with the church. And it just started to seep into every area of my life. And I ended up realizing I needed other people on this journey. And So I joined some cohorts and I was like, I'm going to talk to other people who are trying to figure this out. And from there, it's become just a passion point of mine because it's changed how I interact with Jesus, how I interact with my friends, how I talk with my parents who are trying to understand what it is I have given my life to with talking about movemental Christianity. Why do you do this? But it's just so radically transformed me that I want other people to participate.
Yeah, that's super helpful. I think what I'm hearing is like there's that one angle for you that was sort of the front door, and then it opened up into all of these other MDNA. If we look at the MDNA, one of the pillars there is APES culture. So that became a front door for you. You stepped into that, you discovered something which led to, I want to learn about this, I want to learn about this. And now you're leading cohorts with the APES culture. You're leading a community of toward movemental Christianity. So I hear I'm a learner and I'm taking the next right step for me. I don't have to have it all figured out today. I don't have to do it all today. I don't have to lead the next great movement, but I get to find my part in it. I'll tell my story real quick. We haven't really got into deep personal stories here. We shared a little bit that I'm a part of the Kansas City Underground, which is this decentralized network. If I were to look at the MDNA, I read The Forgotten Ways, which we had Alan on, and we talked a little bit about The Forgotten Ways, this sort of, foundational work that for many of us became a launching point. The first time I read that, which was sort of the front door for me, I think I read most pages 2 to 3 times because it was dense. And I was like, I had no framework for it. So I'm building a framework as I'm reading it, and I just didn't understand it because I had a framework and he's writing about a different one, and I couldn't fit his stuff into what I knew as the church. But for me, I think it was that missional incarnational impulse. And it was an encounter with a neighbor who really called me out. There's no other way to say it. I'm just walking my neighborhood with my wife and our firstborn, and end up in his driveway. And I'll spare you the long story. But basically, the line that came from his mouth was, "You Christians make loving people a job." And I realized that I had made my identity rooted in a building and leading in that space, and had divorced my faith from the everyday reality of my actual neighbors. And what sparked that comment was, you don't know the names of your neighbors. I think, Rich, you mentioned that in the last episode, and I recalled that story again of I remember my second conversion. That moment where I was like, I don't think I'm genuinely following Jesus the way he's invited me to. I don't know the names of the people around me. And I can begin to tell you the stories of reading Hugh Halter's Tangible Kingdom and picking up a copy of Gospel Fluency by Jeff Vanderstelt. Just learning and going, there's another way. There's more to this journey than how to make Sunday morning better and this brand that I am promoting better. And there's a way to follow Jesus that invites my whole self to embody the ways of Jesus, and that would affect my family. And that's a 15-year journey, almost 20 now, I guess, since The Forgotten Ways came out, and I read that, and it was just I want to learn everything about this movemental DNA and how we embody that as people, but also in a local network. So again, it was what's the front door? What's that little spark of imagination that would go, okay, I've digested this, now how do I understand the next one and embody that, and then understand the next one? So those are two sort of personal journeys that I would put out there as really we're both saying the same thing. There's a moment where we go, there might be something different, and I'm going to take the next step, which is read this book, listen to this podcast, have this conversation. So that's an on the ground. Rich, I want to kick it to you to go hey, take us up to the 10,000 foot level. If
Yeah.
people are listening and going like, what do I do with my church, man? What do I
Yeah.
do with these people?
What do I do? Yeah, I mean, because I had that moment as a first conversion in terms of coming to faith, but I had the privilege of being discipled in a discipling culture. So I'd almost have never experienced the institutional context to have to unlearn and relearn. So what was normal for me, it was the disciple making. That was the place. It was Jesus centered. It was missional. It was communal. So it had the other elements of MDNA, but it was a real privilege for me to be mentored by three women who'd chosen at 40 something to live together as a modern monastic prayerful community, a older couple, group of peers, young adults. So that micro church, missional, incarnational dynamic was something that I was formed in at 20, 21, 22, 23. For me, what do I do with my church? What do I do with my life? How do I do this? Where do I start? Almost 10,000 foot, and then we'll take it down to 1 foot. What we're trying to do here is to champion the cause of movemental Christianity. It's not that we have the answers. It's not that it's like buy our badge or brand or product or service and 1 + 1 = 2 and movemental Christianity and revival. What we're trying to do is to help remind the church of her forgotten ways, that movemental architecture and design, the way of Jesus, first century Christianity in a 21st century context. And what we want to do as 100 Movements is champion those movements or those movemental leaders who are going first and going further. So if you're having a moment of where do I start, we want to introduce you and champion the story of somebody who started 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. So in a Western context, there are different training agencies, apostolic movements, platforms, networks who are seeking to live this out. They're the sort of pioneers, the R&D department who've been testing and prototyping and failing and learning as we go. So you talked about, Brian, we haven't got a corner on the market. We're just learning as we go. And what you're doing now is sharing that learning with 30 something cities who are wanting to follow. You're not saying, hey, copy Kansas. You're saying, hey, this is what we've learned. How do you take those principles, put them into your contextual practice? 10,000 foot, one of the ways you can get started is to just learn about those that have gone first and gone further. So you can actually start to hear the stories and be inspired and instructed by different movements who've gone first and further. So we're wanting to champion the cause of movemental Christianity, really celebrate and amplify the wisdom of those pioneers that have gone first. And then the final bit at 10,000 foot is create an ecosystem that can hopefully help every person find their place and play their part. Because it's not everyone's a movement leader, because for most people, movements are run by Steve Jobs, Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King. It's like, that's a big thing. What we're talking about is playing your small part in a big story. It's every person. It's a people movement and a groundswell. So there will be leaders listening who are responsible and influential over 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000. But there'll also be many people that say, how do I live this in my family, my small group, my micro church, my neighborhood? So it's everyone gets to play. And so the big vision, the 10,000 foot, is to create an ecosystem. Alan wrote The Forgotten Ways 20 something years ago. It's a manifesto, a PhD, a wonderful book that really does give the paradigm or the framework and philosophy of movemental Christianity. What we're trying to do is to not just with the stories of those, like you said, Brian, I read the book and I've tried to put it into practice. What we're wanting to do with an MDNA test, with an MDNA set of toolkits, an MDNA cohort, an MDNA field guide, an MDNA podcast, all of these different ways. So, well, if you're a learner and you love to listen into the podcast. If you love to get some data, take the test. If you'd like some training, come on the cohort. And again, what we're doing there is starting you. What we'll then be able to do is say, well, if you're interested in disciple making, here's 3 or 4 really strong movements and trainers you can connect with. If you're interested in organic systems or APEST, here's some really good leaders, resources, organizations. So we're not the bottleneck or the hero. We're the front door and the doorstep to open the rooms of the house. And there's wonderful opportunities to explore, to learn, and to really, really expect something that God will do in you and through you. So the big vision is to champion the cause of movemental Christianity, to really celebrate and amplify the voices, the wisdom, and the stories of those that have gone first as innovators, and create an ecosystem where everyone can play their part and start their journey. And so if that's 10,000 foot, the 1 foot, I'm listening to it going, that all sounds great, Rich, but that's like 8 planets and I've got no idea. I would just say it's either a book, so it's a resource to read, it's some training, it's how do I go in a cohort on this journey, or it's a test. So let's start with some raw materials. So it's one of those doorways to say the next step is stepping forward, but it's not a solo alone step. So is it a book or a test or whatever, but it's also who am I going on the journey? Where am I living this out? And how am I going to do this? So we're not simply saying, take a test and then tuck it away or sound intelligent or tell your friend that you are this. Saying, well, who gets to know the results? Who else could take the test? And how could you embody that? Great, read a book. Brilliant. But we did an episode on knowledge-based versus obedience-based. So read the book. Brilliant. But live the book. Who are you going to live the book with? Where are you going to live it out? So it's that kind of dynamic in terms of this wonderful ecosystem gives you a pick your path option, but the path has to be one that takes you into obedience, is expressed in the context of community, and is something that actually is unlocking potential rather than just an intellectual pursuit.
Yeah, that's good, man. I hope your dog is okay. I think what moved me the most in that is just a reminder that we're not here to say, come do our thing. Lindsey, yes, is connected with 5Q and helping lead that, but it's like, go learn about APES culture. And there's a ton of resources you can get around that for reimagining your staff team, for reimagining how you integrate that into a microchurch setting or a small group setting, or just a group of disciple makers where you want to learn more how to embody Ephesians 4. I mentioned Hugh Halter, Tangible Kingdom. We could talk about Forge and how they train around missional incarnational impulse. We could talk about Starfish in the Spirit and organic systems. We can talk about the Tampa Underground and how they embody, this particular idea of liminality and communitas, or disciple making with saturate. Like, we genuinely are here to go, there's a whole lot of people already doing this that are trying to open up the imagination, set the people of God free to doing the work of unveiling the kingdom in the everyday spaces of life. Like the church, I mentioned in one of the last episodes that Ephesians 1:22 and 23, and I think I quoted like the NIV or NLT, but for those of you not afraid of the message, the way that Eugene Peterson writes that is...
It was all going so well until you went there. Please continue.
The way Eugene Peterson translates that is that the church is not peripheral to the world, but the world is peripheral to the church, which is Christ's body, and how he speaks and acts in all things, or something like that. Like, it's a beautiful way to just reimagine that passage of, we are at the center. And I'm not like holding us up and going like 100 movements or whatever, but like the way Jesus is like, you're my body. And I want to like speak into the world. I want to see that Jeremiah 29 passage, like the shalom of every city, every rural town, every community. I want to see my universal flourishing, and I want to do that through the church. And if you have a hunger for that, connect, join in the story that is being written. And just to reemphasize what Rich said, that might be just hopping over to 100movements.com, taking that the MDNA strengths assessment, and doing that in community. invite some friends to do that with you. Invite some friends to read one of these books. Invite some friends to listen to this, one of these episodes together and go, hey, I felt this. What did you feel when you listened to that? And continue to jump in with us. We're going to keep sharing these stories, interviewing different movements, telling their stories, hearing what walls they faced, what barriers they had to overcome, how they overcame those. There's a lot of practicality in that. And in the next podcast series, I'd say join us in that. We're going to dive into these 6 key MDNA elements for movement. Like we've mentioned them, we've highlighted them, but we're going to go one by one. What do they mean? What does it look like embodied? So episodes around what do we mean by it? Like what's the sort of philosophical, academic idea about it? But also, how did that get embodied in a space, in a place, in a group of people? And really the idea, I think, Rich, you were mentioning too, is also how do you contextualize that where you live, work, and play? 100%. When you said the underground, we don't want to stamp this in other cities. In fact, we ask people, don't do that. Take the principles and go, what does this look like in Columbus or in Atlanta or wherever you are? Because Kansas City is different. So in all the stories we've told, we're telling stories of the way we've joined Jesus, not the way you should join Jesus. And so we hope you'll continue to journey with us. There's a space on the website to connect with us. If there's hey, we want some coaching. We want some help. We're ready to go on the journey. And it might be simple steps, and it might be, hey, we're ready for a complete redesign. And we say we're here for it. We want to be with you, and we want to walk the road together, because it's not an easy one. Jesus called us to come and die with him. But it is one of adventure, and it's one where you can find the greatest joy of your life as you join Jesus and seeing the kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. So thanks for listening to our stories today. We hope you'll continue to join us into this next series on MDNA, and we'll see you next time.